towards the North Pole lived an old man. His name was Nicholas. It always filled Nicholas' heart with joy to see children happy. That is why he would make cute little toys for cute little children.
I will give these toys to the children.
Nicholas loved giving gifts. That's why he made toys and gave them to the children playing in the park.
Look, Nicholas has come.
Take this, children. This is yours. This is yours, and this is for you.
Thank you, Nicholas. Thank you, Nicholas. Thank you, Nicholas.
All of the children were delighted with their new gifts and toys. Seeing them laugh made Nicholas very happy. And he went right back to work making beautiful toys. The very next day, the Christmas festival started. Nicholas packed up his toys and went out to share them with the children.
Hey, there's snow outside. Children will be in their homes. Let's go to their house to give them the gifts.
So that night, Nicholas went to each house secretly, hid his gifts in the socks of each child. But shortly afterward, it started snowing again, and Nicholas became very tired.
If I can just get home, I can hook up my sleigh and reindeer to deliver the rest of these gifts.
Nicholas went to his house, hooked up his sleigh, and took off to deliver the remaining gifts. But the snowfall became so thick that he couldn't see where to drive.
Oh my, I can barely see, and the snow is getting too deep to move. What am I going to do? How will I get these gifts to the children?
Then a fairy appeared in front of his sleigh, and he came to a stop.
Nicholas, don't panic. I will help you. You are a very good person. From now on, I will send elves to help you make your toys. And your reindeer will have the ability to fly into the air with magical powers. That way you can go wherever you want to go. Your love for your children will always be alive. And from now on, you will be known as Santa.
Since then, Nicholas came to be known throughout the world as Santa Claus. Even today, on Christmas Day, children wait for Santa to come and give them their gift. The end. The Kidnapped Santa Claus. Santa Claus lives in the Ho-Ho-Ho Valley in the North Pole, where stands the big rambling castle in which his toys are made. His workers are selected from the Ryls, Knooks, Pixies, and Fairies that live with him, and everyone is as busy as can be, from one year's end to another. On one side is the mighty Forest of the Red. At the other side stands the huge mountain that contains the cave of the Grinch. The Grinch hated Christmas and hated Santa. Now, please don't ask why. No one quite knows the reason. It could be that his head wasn't screwed on just right. It could be, perhaps, that his shoes were too tight. But I think that the most likely reason of all may have been that his heart was 2 sizes too small. Grinch lived in the cave with his dog Mark. One day, he was out grocery shopping with Mark. By passing Ho-Ho-Ho Valley, he sees several Christmas decorations. For it was nearly Christmas Day. He commented,
"Oh, fish. Mark, this is too much. These Christmas decorations are getting on my nerves. Christmas times always annoys me to no end." And all because of Santa Claus. You're right, Mark. There's nothing we can do about it. What are you suggesting, Mark? You think it's actually possible to kidnap Santa? Okay, you're right. We should at least try.
It's common knowledge that while Santa is in the Ho-Ho-Ho Valley, he's protected by the force field that the fairies, Riles, and Nooks create for him. But on Christmas Eve, when he drives his reindeer out into the big world, carrying his sleigh filled with toys for the children, this was the Grinch's best chance to capture him. So, the Grinch laid his plans and awaited the arrival of Christmas Eve. The next day, Christmas Eve came, and the Grinch had come up with a plan.
I know just what to do.
The Grinch laughed in his throat. The moon shone white in the sky, and the snow lay sparkling on the ground as Santa cracked his whip and sped away out of the valley and into the great world beyond. The large sleigh was packed full with huge sacks of toys. As the reindeer dashed onward, our jolly Saint Nick laughed and whistled and sang for joy. For in all his merry life, this was the one day in the year when he was the happiest. The day he lovingly bestowed the treasures of his workshop upon the children. The reindeer knew exactly what was expected of them and dashed along so swiftly that their feet scarcely seemed to touch the snow-covered ground. Suddenly, a rope shot through the moonlight, and a big lasso settled over the arms and midsection of Santa Claus and quickly drew tight. Before he could resist or even cry out, he was jerked from the seat of the sleigh and tumbled head first into a snowbank, while the reindeer rushed onward, oblivious to the hijacking of their driver. Such a surprising experience confused old Santa for a moment, and when he had gathered his senses, he realized that the cunning Grinch had yanked him from the snowdrift and bound him securely with many coils of rope. He then carried the kidnapped Santa away to his cave, where he chained him to the rocky wall, unable to escape. Laughed the Grinch, rubbing his hands together with a wicked glee.
What will the children do now? I know. They'll cry and yell and stomp. And when they find there are no toys on Christmas morning, I will have finally stopped Christmas.
Now, it so happened that on this Christmas Eve, Santa had taken with him in his sleigh Nutter the Ryle, Peter the Nook, Kilter the Pixie, and a small fairy named Whisk, his 4 favorite assistants. These little creatures he found very useful in helping him to distribute his gifts to the children. And when their master was so suddenly dragged from the sleigh, they were all snugly tucked underneath the seat where the sharp wind could not reach them. The tiny immortals knew nothing of the capture of Santa until some time after he had disappeared. But finally, they realized that they had missed his cheery voice. And as the master always sang or whistled on his journeys, the silence told them that something was wrong. Little Whisk stuck out her head from underneath the seat and found Santa had gone. And there was nobody to drive the sleigh.
Whoa!
She yelled, and the deer obediently came to a halt. Peter, Nutter, and Kilter all jumped upon the seat and looked back over the track made by the sleigh. But Santa had been left miles and miles behind.
What shall we do?
Asked Whisk anxiously. All the mirth and mischief had vanished from her wee face by this great calamity.
We must go back at once and find the boss.
No, if we go back or delay, there will not be enough time to get the toys to the children before morning, And that would grieve Santa more than anything else.
I'm certain a wicked creature has captured him, and his plan must be to destroy Christmas. So, our first goal is to get the toys delivered. Afterward, we can search for Santa.
This was a good, sensible plan. So Peter the Knook called the reindeer, and the faithful animals once again sprang forward and dashed over hill and valley, through forest and plain, until they came to the place where children were sleeping and dreaming of the gifts they would find on Christmas morning. The little creatures had set themselves to their mission, for although they had assisted Santa on many of his journeys, their friend had always been in charge and instructed them. But now, they had to do this job all on their own, and they didn't know the children as well as Santa did. It's no wonder that they made some silly mistakes. When they finished their work, the sun was coming up, and the toys were all delivered. So they returned to Ho-Ho-Ho Valley. The little folk began to wonder how they might rescue their boss, and they realized that they must first figure out what happened to him and find out where he was now. Suddenly, on the heap of ice, they saw Santa watching them, getting closer and closer. Soon, they gathered around him and asked what happened.
Ho, 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 ho! Merry Christmas, friends! Don't worry, I'm all right. That grumpy Grinch thought Christmas would be destroyed by capturing me. But he didn't know that Christmas has never been about me or the gifts. It has always been about the gift of Jesus and sharing the joy he puts in our hearts with others.
The Grinch was following Santa and eavesdropping from behind, and soon realized his mistake. He then came aboard the sleigh to celebrate Christmas with Santa, Riles, Knooks, Pixies, and Fairies.
We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
The end. The Snow Queen. Gerda was a young girl who lived with her grandma. Her fiancé lived next door. His name was Kay. Between Gerda's house and Kay's, there was a small walkway. Gerda and Kay planted red roses there as a symbol of their eternal love. They always talked about getting married. Then, on Winter's Day, they were sitting beside their rose bush when Gerda's grandma cried,
Look, the Snow Queen is gathering her flakes.
Gerda and Kay rushed to the window. Kay looked at the Snow Queen through the window and stuck out his tongue.
Don't do that, Kay. What if she sees you? She might come after you.
Then he climbed through the window and back to his bedroom, which was in his house, which was right next to Gerda's house. That night, Kay was getting ready for bed. He walked towards his window and peers out. He spots a unique-looking snowflake and finds that it's rapidly growing larger and larger until it became the Snow Queen. She held in her hand a plate of sweets called Turkish Delights. Kay couldn't resist. He snatched a handful from the plate. As he shoved them greedily into his mouth, the lady grabbed his wrist and pulled him out of the window and onto her sled. Her team of horses suddenly took off. Kay should have been very frightened, but the sweets had dulled his sense of discernment and alarm. The next morning, when Gerda came to visit Kay, he wasn't there. She looked everywhere for him. She raced down to the village square, and she cried, "Have you seen Kay? Have you seen my Kay?" But no one had seen him. Nobody knew where he had gone.
Don't let my Kay be dead. Please don't let my Kay be dead. I don't believe he is.
Gerda looked up, and there sat a little sparrow.
When we're searching for the food we set high on the rooftops, we see everything. We would have seen him unless he fell in the river. I'll go and ask the river fairy." A tiny spark of hope lit up in Gerda's heart. If he drowned, the river fairy will know. So she went near the river and shouted, "River, river, did my Kay come by here? Did he fall in your deep waters and drown?" And the river fairy came up from the water with a sweet smile on her face and said, "Oh, my sweet child, no, your Kay didn't come down here. Now don't cry. Where is he then?" "I wish I knew. But there is an old witch who lives beside my shore. She might be generous to you, but you have to be cautious about her." "I will do anything for my love. Can you please take me there?" "Why not? Just hop in that little boat. My streams will lead you to the witch's cottage." The river fairy then disappeared, and Gerda hopped into the boat. The little boat floated on, with the current getting faster and faster. Then Gerda saw a small cottage. An old lady came hobbling outside. She was bent over and carrying a walking stick. The old woman walked to the edge of the river, caught the boat with her walking stick, and drew it into the land. She helped Gerda out. Although Gerda was afraid of this strange old witch, she was totally determined to find Kay again. "Come and tell me who you are."
Gerda told her everything. "Have you seen my Kay?"
"No, but perhaps he might come by."
They went inside the cottage. There was a bowl of beautiful cherries on the table.
"Don't be sad now, Gerda. Your love will find a way to you. Now, eat those cherries."
While Gerda was eating, the old woman combed her long hair with a golden comb. As she combed, she whispered,
"I have longed for a granddaughter like you."
Gerda forgot about Kay because the old woman had cast a spell on her through the magic comb. The old witch wanted to keep Gerda as her own. After a while, Gerda murmured, "I will stay here forever." But one day, while in the garden, Gerda noticed the red roses. They reminded her of Kay. The memory of Kay broke the old woman's spell, and Gerda raced to the garden gate. She ran till she could run no longer and stopped at the stone bridge. Suddenly, she was surrounded by trolls. Trolls rushed forward, seizing Gerda.
"She is fat and pretty, and she has been fed on nuts and honey. How nice she will taste!" "She shall play with me. She shall give me her muff and her pretty dress."
The little girl troll, who was about the same age as Gerda, wore a mournful look on her face. She clasped little Gerda around the waist and said,
"They shall not kill you. I will protect you."
All the trolls laughed and agreed to give Gerda the little troll. Gerda explained her story to her, how fond she was of Kay, how she must find him. After they ate and drank, they were walking below the stone bridge. Above them, more than 100 pigeons, who pretended to be asleep, watched and listened to them.
We have seen Kay
Where?
in the carriage of the Snow Queen.
Where were they going?
Lapland. The Snow Queen has a castle there.
Little girl troll looked serious, nodded her head, and said,
I'll help you to get your love.
The little girl troll went near to her pet, the reindeer, squinted her eyes, and said,
I will untie your cord. You shall run fast and carry this sweet girl to the castle of the Snow Queen. Help her find her Kay.
Then the little troll girl cut the string of the reindeer, and away Gerda and reindeer flew. He ran on until he reached the Snow Queen's castle. There he set Gerda down.
You must go on alone from here. I will be here when you come back. I will make sure you and your love will get home safely.
Gerda walks there, outside the tall ice castle of the Snow Queen. She was suddenly surrounded by thousands of snowflakes that fluttered about her. They were the Snow Queen's guards. Gerda prayed. The cold was so great, she could see her own breath. It poured like steam from her mouth. As she continued to pray, the steam appeared to increase until it took the shape of little angels. By the time Gerda had finished her prayers, a whole legion stood around her. They attacked snowflakes, and the battle began. Gerda hastened onward to the Snow Queen's castle, and she found Kay deep within its icy walls.
Kay, my Kay, I have found you at last.
Kay was almost frosted over and blue from head to toe, for he had become so addicted to Turkish delight, he no longer felt anything else at all. All this time, the Snow Queen had fed him that sweet, sinister, and powerful spell. Gerda hugged him and wept hot tears that fell on his chest and penetrated his heart. They melted the ice, which had become Kay's heart. Warmth returned to his body. He recognized Gerda and cried joyfully.
Gerda, where have you been all this time?
Kay, I was looking for you, my love. I found you at last.
They clung together, laughing and weeping for joy. The loyal reindeer was waiting for them. Upon seeing them approach, he knelt down and allowed them to climb upon his back. They flew home with joy and gratitude dancing in their eyes. Soon after, they got married and lived happily ever after. The end.
Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Once upon a time, a queen sat sewing by her window. The snow was falling outside, and she watched the flakes settle on her black ebony windowsill. As she sewed, she pricked her finger with the needle, and a drop of red blood fell onto the snow. She thought to herself,
I wish I had a daughter with skin as white as the snow, with lips as red as this blood, and with hair as black as this ebony.
By and by, her wish came true, and she gave birth to a baby girl whom she called Snow White. But the queen died when her baby was born, and not long afterwards the king married again. The new queen was very beautiful, but she was an evil woman and could not bear the idea that anyone might be lovelier than she. A magic mirror hung in her room, and each day she would look in it and ask,
Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of us all?
And the mirror would reply,
You, O Queen, are fairer than all.
The years went by, and each day Snow White grew more beautiful, until one morning when the queen looked yet again into her mirror and asked,
Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of us all?
You are fair, O Queen, is true, but Snow White is fairer far than you.
The queen was beside herself with hatred and jealousy, and resolved to get rid of her stepdaughter at once. She sent for a huntsman and ordered him to take the girl deep into the forest and kill her, and bring back her heart as proof that she was dead. The huntsman rode with Snow White into the deepest part of the forest, but when he took out his knife to kill her, he was so touched by the girl's beauty and gentleness that he could not plunge its blade through her heart.
I cannot kill you myself, but I cannot take you back to the palace, and I fear the wild beasts of the forest will soon eat you up.
he left Snow White in the forest, and on his way back he killed a deer instead and gave its heart to the queen, who believed that it was Snow White's. Poor Snow White, meanwhile, was wandering in the dark forest, terrified. The wild beasts watched her as she stumbled through the trees, but they did not touch her. At nightfall, she came to a clearing in the wood where there was a little house. She tapped on the shutters, but no one answered. She tapped on the door and then opened it and went inside. She found herself in a low room with a wooden table and benches stretching the length of it. On the table were 7 bowls, 7 spoons and 7 cups. For this was the home of the 7 dwarfs who worked in the mountains digging for gold. Snow White was so hungry that she sat down and ate a little of the pudding in each bowl and sipped some milk from each cup. Then she went upstairs, where there was a room just large enough to hold 7 small beds. She slipped into one of them and was soon fast asleep. As the moon came up in the sky, the 7 dwarfs returned. Each carried his shovel and pickaxe on his back and his bag of gold tied to his waist with a leather strap. As soon as they set their lanterns on the table, they saw someone had been in their house.
Who has been eating our food? Yes, who has been eating our food?
They cried. Then they climbed upstairs to the bedroom and found Snow White fast asleep on a bed.
And tell me, who is this beautiful child? I wonder, who is it?
They asked each other in delight and amazement. Then Snow White awoke and told them her story, and the dwarfs felt so sorry for her that they invited her to stay with them and be their housekeeper. They warned her that she must never open the door to anyone while they were away digging in the mountains, for they feared that the wicked queen would find out she was alive and try to kill her. So Snow White stayed with the dwarfs and made their beds and swept their rooms and cooked supper for them. She was very happy with the dwarfs, and before long she had forgotten all about her wicked stepmother. But one day, however, the queen again asked her magic mirror,
Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of us all?
You are fair, O queen, it's true, but Snow White is fairer far than you. Deep within the forest glade, she her home with dwarfs has made.
The queen's face turned black with rage at these words. Realizing the huntsman had tricked her, she resolved to kill Snow White with her own hands. She disguised herself as a peddler woman and made her way to the dwarf's house in the forest. Snow White was sitting by the window, patching a jacket belonging to one of the dwarfs. The queen called out to her in a rough countrywoman's voice,
Buy my buttons, ribbons and lace, each one will suit your face.
Delighted at the chance of buying something pretty, Snow White quite forgot the dwarf's warning. She ran to open the door.
The laces on your bodice are loose, my dear,
said the disguised queen.
Let me tie them up for you.
And with that, she laced Snow White up so swiftly and so tightly that the girl could not breathe and fell to the ground as if she were dead. Laughing, the wicked queen hurried back to her palace, feeling certain she had got rid of Snow White for good. When the dwarfs came home that night, they found Snow White lying in the doorway. As soon as they lifted her up, they could see what had happened. They cut the laces on her bodice with a knife, and at once the air rushed back into Snow White's lungs and she began breathing again. She told them what had happened, and the dwarfs realized that the peddler woman was the wicked queen in disguise, still determined to kill her.
Never open the door to anyone again.
They begged her, and Snow White promised she would not. That night the queen went to her mirror again.
Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of us all?
You are fair, O Queen, it's true, but Snow White is fairer far than you.
At this, the enraged queen rushed to her cellar in the castle where she kept her secret potions. There, she made a poisoned apple. One side was bright red and the other green. The green side could safely be eaten, but one bite of the red side would kill in a second. Yet again, the queen disguised herself. This time, she dressed as a country woman in ragged clothes with a basket of apples over her arm. On top of the pile, she placed the beautifully colored poisoned apple. She arrived at the dwarf's house just as Snow White was drawing water from the well. But as soon as the girl saw her coming, she grew frightened and ran indoors, bolting the door behind her. Then she heard the voice of the country woman calling,
Apples! Fresh and sweet apples!
And she longed to test them. If she opened the window and kept the door shut, there could be no danger. So she opened the shutter and leaned out.
Let me see your apples,
she called down.
Taste this one, my pretty. It is one of the best,
replied the queen, holding up the poisoned apple. Then, as the girl hesitated a bit, she went on.
Don't be afraid to eat it. See, I'll cut it into 2 halves, one for you and one for me.
She began to eat the green half and threw the red one up to Snow White, who could not resist taking a bite. But she had no sooner put the apple into her mouth than she fell to the ground dead. That night, the queen polished and stroked the mirror as she asked,
Mirror, mirror in my hand, who is the fairest in the land?
Queen of beauty, you are she. None can now your rival be.
When the dwarfs came home and found Snow White dead beyond reviving, they built a glass coffin which they set among flowers nearby so they could watch over her day and night. One day, a young prince came riding by with his huntsmen. Seeing the glass coffin, he dismounted from his horse, curious for a look at the girl inside. She seemed to be in a deep sleep, for her skin was still as white as snow, her lips as red as blood, and her hair as black as ebony. Her beauty enchanted him. He begged the dwarfs,
Oh, please let me carry the coffin away with me. I will give you greater riches than you can ever hope to dig out of these mountains.
No, no. She is worth more to us than all the gold in the world.
But at last, when they saw that the prince had fallen in love with their dear Snow White, they took pity on him and gave him the coffin as a present. The prince told his huntsmen to carry the glass case carefully to his palace. But as they were lifting it up, one of them stumbled over a root, and the jarring made the piece of apple fall from between Snow White's lips. She awoke and sat up, looking about her in amazement. The prince told her everything that had happened and then asked her to become his wife. And Snow White, who had loved him the moment she set eyes on him, happily agreed. A great feast was held in honor of their marriage, and one of the guests invited was the wicked queen. As she robed herself for the banquet, she asked the mirror,
Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of us all?
Fairer than you was rarely seen, but Snow White too is now a queen. Your fairness then is nothing worth. Now Snow White's radiance fills the earth.
When she heard this, the queen smashed the mirror in pieces to the ground, and she was so filled with a jealous rage that her heart burst and she fell down dead. But Snow White and her prince lived happily ever after.
The Little Match Girl. It was a bitterly cold evening. Flurries of snow filled the sky and covered the darkening village below this New Year's Eve.
Oh, my sweet little child, I am so sorry I have to send you out into the frozen darkness to sell these matches this evening. But, as you can see, I cannot walk because I'm sick. Yes, Grandma, I understand. And remember, sweetheart, with the money you make from selling these matches, we can eat tonight. Otherwise, we will be forced to try and sleep with our stomachs empty. Now go, my child. Don't worry, Grandma. I will sell all the matches, and we'll be sure to bring home lots of food as well. Goodbye.
In this chilling darkness, there wisped along the cobblestone streets a poor little girl who was nearly 8 years old and an orphan. She had a cap to warm her head, and her clothes were all threadbare and nearly worn through in places. She walked with calloused and wounded bare feet, for she had no shoes. She stood on the corner, clinging hopefully to the matchboxes which she held in her thin, bare hands. People bustled all about her, busy with Christmas shopping, not even giving a glance to the poor little child.
Sweetie, do you like what I bought you in that toy store? Oh, yes, Mother. The doll is pretty. Thank you. And the dress is so lovely.
The little match girl's eyes filled with tears. But there was no time to cry, for she must sell some matches so she and her grandmother can have dinner that evening. So she bravely wiped the grief from her eyes and said to the woman,
Lady, would you like to buy some matches, please? They're very sturdy and nice. No, I don't need matches. Get away from my daughter. I don't know why they let these kinds of people on streets to mingle among decent people such as ourselves. Look at her dress, Mother. It's so old. I'm sorry, but these are the only clothes I have. It's not my problem. And besides, I don't have money. Even if I did, I wouldn't buy matches. So get away and leave us alone. But they're only 1 penny each. Don't you understand? I don't want it. Now go away, or I will call the police.
The little match girl trembles. Snow begins to fall once more as she presses on with her quest to try and sell matches to people passing by.
Ma'am, please, would you like to buy some matches? They're magical, you know. When you light one, all your wishes will come true. That's nonsense. Those are fairy tales. But ma'am, please buy at least one. Its light will give you the most wonderful Christmas. I told you. No, I don't need one. It is true. Each one is different. I don't want matches today. Why don't you go home? It's a cold night. I can't, ma'am. I don't have parents, and my grandma is very sick. I don't have any money left to buy medicine or food for her. I do wish I could help you, my dear, but I do not have enough money to spare. Maybe somebody else will buy some from you. Maybe.
The little match girl's spirits began to sink as the cold winds became stronger and swirled round about her frail form. seeming to snatch at her with its icy claws. With a final blast of determination, the little match girl continued to offer her wares, but to no avail. Finally, feeling alone and defeated, she slumps down upon the sidewalk, shivering uncontrollably from the cold.
My hands and feet feel like blocks of ice. I will light one of my trusty matches just to warm my fingers a little.
The poor little match girl's hands were shivering so greatly that she was unable to light a match. After some time and great effort, she lights up one single match. And to her surprise, the matchstick transformed into an iron stove, and the little girl soon began to feel warm. She put her tiny icicle-like fingers closer to the stove. She was very happy, but a few moments later, a snowflake dropped right on her matchstick and snuffed it out. So she stood up and once again tried to sell her matches. Alas, not a single match had been sold thus far. Suddenly, she heard a voice.
"Hi there, little girl. What do you have there to sell?"
I sell matches. Would you like to buy one?
As soon as she turned towards the voice, she sees an old homeless woman standing in a corner with her skinny dog. They both are shivering with cold.
"Don't you see that I am as poor as you?"
Oh, sorry. I have to sell these matches to get some food for my grandma.
Poor girl. Well, will you please take care of my dog for me? It will only be here for a little while. I must go and find some food. Perhaps I can bring some food for you too.
Well, at least I can get some food for my grandma. But please come soon, as I have to get her medicine too.
The little match girl agreed to watch after the dog, and the old woman left with a promise to return as quickly as she could. She held to the dog's leash as he sat quietly on the corner. In a while, the poor girl started shivering again. She thought for a moment and took out the matchbox and burnt it against the wall. To her surprise, she sees a table full of wonderful things to eat, with turkey, lamb, goose, fish, apples, and cakes.
Oh, I wish I could eat it all. I feel so peaceful in this place.
As soon as she reached for a piece of cake, the flame of the matchstick went out, and everything vanished. She was very disappointed. She looked up towards the sky and prayed.
Oh Lord, please take me out of this sadness. I'm so hungry and miserable. Please help me.
Just then, she saw a star falling from the heavens, and she recalled something that her grandma had told her.
Grandma says when a star falls, someone dies. My grandma is very sick. Does it mean that I lost my grandma? Oh, she loved me more than anyone else in the whole world.
She took out another matchstick and lit it. She was surprised to see her grandmother standing in front of her.
Oh, Grandma, is that you?
Yes, child. I am here for you.
The little match girl was pleased to see her grandma, but was rather alarmed, for she could see that her grandma was floating in the air.
Don't be afraid, my child. I am safe and well now. You don't have to worry about me anymore.
The little match girl opens her mouth to tell her grandma how hard she tried to sell the matchsticks. Then the flame of the matchstick went out once again, and her grandma disappeared. This time, the poor child lights all of her matchsticks at once, as she didn't want her grandma to disappear again. And the glow was so bright, it was as sunlight. Her grandma reappears and gazed lovingly at the little match girl, smiling.
Grandma, I'm so scared. I don't want to stay here anymore. Please, take me with you.
Yes, dear. I will take you with me. Give me your hand.
Grandmother took the little match girl's hand, then lifted her in her arms. They both started soaring upward to the sky.
How are you feeling now, my sweet angel?
Oh, Grandma, now I feel wonderful. I don't feel hungry or cold anymore. I feel as light as a feather.
Grandma smiled again, and they both flew to heaven. And in that same moment, a little star fell from the sky. The next day, when the sun was rising up again, the little match girl was sitting on the ground with all the burnt matches in her hand, and a contented smile resting on her face. Many people looked on at the little match girl lying lifeless upon the sidewalk. They all grieved for the loss of the bright light that her life was to them. The end.